and gown. Your name will be announced. People will applaud, and you'll be handed a piece of paper by the president or the dean. It just won't be a diploma. But it will be something that will allow you to be recognized, and hopefully next semester you can make up the course or courses that you missed. So he was very kind. He always wanted to be fair and to do what was right and to maintain full integrity in the process. And those are qualities that were suitable not just for his occupation, but for all of us, for all of our time. Another thing that I recall about Jack in his administrative role was that he was so careful about minutiae. He would get into things and get them right down to the bottom point, tear them apart, look at them, rebuild. He discovered in his office that there were certain things going very badly, not caused by people in his office, but by the administration, the higher-ups. In this case, the provost and the president. And this was potentially very damaging for the university should this come out. So Jack talked to me and convinced me. He talked to the dean, Jane Weiner, very, very good dean. And together we marched over to confront the provost. I could still feel that we were in March. I served in the military for a good number of years, and I still have that feeling of marching. And so we strode over to the provost's office, told him what was happening. We didn't like it, and there was a lot of pushback. I could still hear the provost saying twice, "I'm not going to fall on my sword for this." Well, Jack had all the information. He said, "Well, you just look at this. You just can't do this." And in the end, we got a very grudging acceptance. But that was a case where Jack actually saved the university for what could have been a lot of public embarrassment. I can't give you all the specifics now. It was at least 30 years ago, but I've always told myself, I'm not going to let that cat out of the bag. Jack was one of the great persons in my life. We all have some, but there aren't many. And when you have someone like that in your life, you can just be thankful. It's kind of an accident, really, that we met up like that, but those things happen. And I think now that we're not through. I think of my dear friend, hail and farewell. You're in a safe place. I hope to enter there someday myself, not too soon, but to be there with you. And I can almost hear Jack saying now, "Otto, what took you so long? Let's talk." And I know I'll enjoy that conversation. I'll navigate down these steps here. Thank you.
Otto, I remember when he was asked to become a dean, and he had some reservations about it because dean had never been a term of endearment for him before that. I also remember, when I was young, him saying some not very nice things about the administration of Grover Murray. And then later, during the administration of Laura Cavazos, he told me, you know, Grover Murray wasn't so bad after all. Years ago, I said something. I don't remember saying it. I think I must have been 2 or so, but I only know I said it because my father told me I said it. It was some occasion where a 2 or 3-year-old boy was not getting his way, and I told him he was a bad daddy. I want to be clear, he was not a bad daddy. He was, in my opinion, the best daddy this young boy could hope for. And from what I know also, he was the best professor and advisor that many students could have hoped for, the best elder at the Presbyterian Church that they could want. He was the best scoutmaster that any troop would need. He was the best husband to my mother. And as I grow older, and we grew into more of an adult-to-adult relationship, I would say he was also the best friend anyone could have. Father worked very hard at his profession, but not at the cost of attention to his family. He was diligent in providing for us both in material need and in interactive support. He was involved in our schooling, in our church life, and many other aspects of it. When I was a Cub Scout, and I became a Cub Scout sort of on my own initiative, and I don't think he had an enthusiasm for getting me into that at first, but he was very active and became the den leader for the Webelos' Den when I was of that age. And then later, when I was in Boy Scouts, he was driving us to our meeting every Monday night, not just us, but other people in our neighborhood. The pastor lived a block away from us, and his son was in the troop, and others who needed help getting there. He taught merit badge classes in citizenship in the community and the nation and the world, and he became essentially the hiking leader for our troop, leading big groups of boys hiking in New Mexico. And we went on some hiking trips ourselves. My brother one year was undergoing leader training at a camp in New Mexico, and my father and I went with him. Father driving, I was not yet able to drive. Jim, you weren't able to drive yet. You were still in junior high school at that point. Anyway, after we dropped him off in northern New Mexico, Father and I went for that whole week hiking in the San Juan Mountains in what was to become the Weminuche Wilderness in southern Colorado. And we hiked 50 miles. There's a special patch you can get, but you have to do a service project along with that. And we didn't do that. We just did the hiking. But the next year, he led a group of Boy Scouts from our troop on a 50-mile hike with all the requirements of the 50-mile patch. I wasn't able to go that year because I was going down the Colorado River, the one in Texas, not the one in the West, the Colorado River, to get my 50-mile afloat patch. So I couldn't do both at the same time. He was always very energetic with that. He was always very supportive of all the students, all the scouts in the troop. When I was in high school, and I had taken 2 classes my sophomore year in high school in mathematics, doubling up, not 2 semesters, but 2 classes each semester. And so I had finished trigonometry and analytical geometry by my junior year. And while you could take calculus at the high school, instead, we arranged for me, that is to say, he arranged at my request, that I take it instead at Texas Tech University during the summer. He was always very supportive of my intellectual pursuits as I went on to earn a few degrees in those. He was supportive of me when I was looking for a college and found a very nice one in Illinois to go to. He was at my graduation. He helped me get enrolled at Texas Tech later, where I earned a master's degree, and encouraged me when I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago for a PhD. He was supportive of me later when I decided to go to seminary. and he was at every graduation ceremony that I ever went to, that I was ever in. He taught me an appreciation for mathematics. When he was 36 years old, I was 6 years old, and he taught me about square roots because I was his square root. He taught me things about history and religion, science, many things. He was always very supportive of me. He also taught me appreciation for music and art and literature and appreciation for traditions and even for ceremonies and things like that. Every time there was a commencement at Texas Tech, I think the faculty had a requirement that they participate, some fraction of them, but he did it every time. He always enjoyed getting his academical gown on and being part of that ceremony. He, in part of that appreciation for what you wear to the graduation, when I graduated high school, I chose to wear this tie, this particular tie. You've seen me, some of you who are parts of this congregation have seen me here before wearing bow ties, and my first wife got me an appreciation of the bow ties you actually tie, but this one's a clip-on. This tie I wore for my high school graduation, and I chose to wear it for that occasion because this is a tie that he bought in the spring of 1952 when he was graduating from high school to wear to his high school graduation. Some years later, when we were visiting my brother when he was living in England, we visited him for Christmas in 2004, and I had a book called England's 1,000 Best Churches. Now, I want to say it's based upon architecture and not on doctrine. And it was written by a man named Simon Jenkins, and when I would say we ought to go visit that church, my wife would say, "Does Simon say we should go visit that?" But one day while we were there, some people were going, I think Jim had to go into work, and my wife and my mother-in-law decided they were going to go do some shopping. And Father and I walked from Tinchwick, where Jim lived, to Chetwood, which was about 3 miles away, just to visit one of the churches in the book, St. Mary and St. Nicholas Church. 3 miles there and 3 miles back. And the next day, Father and I and my mother-in-law, Carol Ann, walked 5 miles to another church that was in the book. Only this time, Jim and my mother and my wife met us there, having driven there, and so we didn't have to walk back. It was good to visit these things and appreciate them. My father gave me an appreciation for all sorts of things. When I went to seminary, sometimes I would find a book that I really liked, and when I read a passage, I would phone Father and discuss it with him. And really, when I started, he lent me a book of his that was very informative on my very first class in seminary. And so we had great conversations on that. I wanted to say of things that he gave me an appreciation for, poetry was also one of them. I remember, I don't know that he was part of this appreciation, but when we were early in school, I remember Jim being required to memorize a poem. And Jim didn't appreciate poetry the way I did. Jim found the shortest poem in the book that they had and memorized it. And if you want to hear what it was, corner me later and I will recite it to you from memory from when Jim was in first grade. But he also had introduced me to another poem that I think is very appropriate here, a poem called Abu Ben Adam by James Henry Lee Hunt, generally just known as Lee Hunt. In a way, it's an interpretation of something from the first epistle of John, chapter 4, where he says, "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them." That's 1 John. The poem goes like this. Abu Ben Adam, may his tribe increase, awoke one night from a deep dream of peace and saw within the moonlight of his room, making it rich and like a lily in bloom, an angel writing in a book of gold. Exceeding peace had made Ben Adam bold, and to the presence in his room he said, "What writest thou?" The vision raised its head, and with a look made of all sweet accord, answered, "The names of those who love the Lord." "And is mine one?" said Abu. "Nay, not so," replied the angel. Abu spoke more low, but cheerily still, and said, "I pray thee then, write me as one that loves his fellow men." The angel wrote and vanished. The next night it came again with a great awakening light and showed the names whom love of God had blessed. And lo, Ben Adam's name led all the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Sterrett. That was beautiful. It's not surprising that you would bring a spiritual reflection here because of the work that you do every day. And I have to say that listening to each of you, listening to Brian, listening to Otto, listening to Sterrett, I thought, wow, we really know the same person. And sometimes, you know, when I'm listening to the old stories about people that I got to know late in their lives, I'm surprised. Oh, I didn't know that, or But all of this was so consistent with the Jack I knew. I discovered Jack Collins before I arrived here in 2016. As I was looking over the materials that would teach me about the church I was about to go and serve, I opened the church's 150th anniversary book and read Jack's marvelous, eloquent introduction. I was going to hold it up here, but I forgot to grab it. It's out on the table there, a copy of it. It's the sort of sage green book, and just page through it. The beginning that he wrote is so lovely. In that introduction, he placed the church's history within a broader background of what was happening in the United States and in the wider world over those 150 years. But he didn't overdo the big picture. He kept the people of this church in this corner of Menominee clearly in focus. But by placing the congregation in its historical context, he allowed us to see it more clearly. I trust that's what he did a lot of in his teaching and his scholarship. I was charmed. In my early days here, I mostly saw Jack on Sunday mornings, where he was always dressed to the nines. His suits and vests fit him perfectly, his shoes shone, his hair was always neat. He was a dapper gentleman with a kind smile, a confiding manner, and a twinkle in his eye. He told me early on that I shouldn't take offense if he occasionally fell asleep during my sermons. He promised me it wouldn't be my fault, though I wasn't sure how he knew that early on. But what I noticed more than his falling asleep was how often he wanted to comment on my sermons after the worship service. He'd tell me how they brought to mind an idea about the development of individualism in Western thought. or some other high concept. And then the next week, he'd bring me a scholarly tome that he was sure I would benefit from reading. I never fessed up to him that they were way too rarefied for me. When I think of Jack, it seems to me that he embodied much of what the Apostle Paul celebrates in that brief passage we heard read from Philippians. Truth, honor, excellence. As a historian, Jack brought a care and diligence to his search for what can be truthfully said about human history. He was very genuine. Even though he had a lot of dignity, he didn't stand on formality. And that influenced his capacity for the deep, lifelong friendships like we heard both Otto and Brian talk about, and with so many other folks. His devotion to his family, not just to Lynn and the boys, but to his parents and siblings back home, and his commitment to the places where he was planted, from the family farm in Saskatchewan to Lubbock, Texas, to Menominee and Baldwin, where he and Lynn and the Blakeleys landed after retirement. He planted himself in churches, too. Before he headed off to college, Jack's father, who had not been involved in religious observance for much of his adult life, his father encouraged him to join a church when he got to Rice University in Houston. He told him, "Our family's Presbyterian, check it out." And Jack heeded his father's advice and joined a local Presbyterian church where he found mentors and friends and a place where he could be of service, not to mention a rich topic for his dissertation on the early history of the Presbyterian Church in Scotland. Jack's honor showed in his commitment as a young man to caring for his father, who was suffering with late-stage Parkinson's. Even when he found himself drawn to the smart and lovely Lynn Dexter early in his graduate school studies, he pulled back from committing himself because he needed to make his dad a priority. Fortunately for both of them, and for us, Lynn carried a torch for him throughout that time, and when he reached out to her again after a year or more, she dumped her other suitors and took him right back. She'd already decided the first time she saw him talking with the professor in their history of British constitutional law, was it? Class. She decided this was the man she wanted to marry. And no one has ever accused Lynn of not knowing her own mind. She showed her interest in him the following class period, when Jack accidentally sat in her assigned seat and she told him he had to move. It was the beginning of a lifelong romance. Jack maintained a strong connection to that farm in Saskatchewan, and the family would take the 3-day trip there pretty much every year, camping along the way. And Sterrett told me that his wife told him early on that his parents were superb parents because they managed to convince their sons that driving 3 days to Canada every summer and staying at a farm was a vacation. The photo that he took in his early 20s, this one that's on the front of the little booklet from Olson Funeral Home, this photo he took in his early 20s of the tractor on the farm held pride of place in their home, and it provided the inspiration for a couple of artists to base their paintings on it. Jack grew up poor. 3 of his siblings died in childhood, and it wasn't until he got to college that he experienced life with electricity and indoor plumbing. But the farm was in Jack's blood, and so, as we have already heard, was hard physical work. He loved to garden and to build furniture. He loved hiking and he loved backpacking. He was always strong and he remained physically robust till just a year or two before his death. When Jack and Lynn retired here to the Menominee area, they had agreed with each other that they were ready to become laborers rather than managers after their years of carrying too much weight on their shoulders. And they served with gladness. But their wisdom and steady vision contributed much to both this church and the wider community. And Jack continued serving as a quiet leader. It's hard when someone as gifted and brilliant as Jack experiences dementia. It's hard on the person who's ill, and it's hard for those who love them. For Lynn to live with his growing paranoia and mistrust and to experience no longer being recognized by her precious husband was excruciating. But it wasn't until his impulses to wander outside in the cold, dark countryside in the middle of the night, in the dead of winter, until that forced her to sleep outside the bedroom door, blocking his exit every night, that she finally acknowledged that she couldn't care for him at home anymore. And so, Jack was moved very much against his will to the beautiful memory care facility at Comforts of Home. It took months for his fear and anger to quiet, and from what Brian said, maybe it lasted longer than I even realized. But the consistency and warmth of the staff and that beautiful space began to exert a calm on Jack. At least that was something I witnessed. Even as he lost language and memory, Jack remained a kind and gracious host. I loved visiting him in his little room at Comforts. Once I reminded him who I was, he would be happy to have me join him for a cup of coffee. If I was confusing him by talking too fast or putting too many things together in the same sentence, he had ways of letting me know. His communication skills were bigger than language. His spirit and intelligence were still there, alive and well. A core of warmth and even joy remained vivid in him until his final stroke left him non-responsive. I have to tell you that remembering Jack, it will be easy for me to focus on what was true and honorable and worthy of praise, because that is so much of who he was. May each and all of us treasure our memories of this worthy man, and as we do, may we know the presence of the God of peace. Amen. I invite you to join your hearts with mine in a prayer of thanks. O God, our strength and Redeemer, giver of life and conqueror of death, we praise you with humble hearts. With faith in your great mercy and wisdom, we entrust Jack to your eternal care. We praise you for your steadfast love for him throughout his earthly life. We thank you for all that he was to those who loved him and for his quiet faithfulness to you and your people. We thank you that for Jack, all sickness and sorrow is ended and death itself is past, and that he has entered the home where all your people gather in peace. Sustain, O God, Jack's family and friends in their loneliness. Comfort them as they remember him in all his uniqueness and as they share their memories, their sadness, their laughter, and their tears with one another. And let's join our voices together now in the Lord's Prayer. In this congregation, we use the words debts and debtors, but I invite you to use whatever words are most familiar to you. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And now I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and to turn in the maroon hymnals to number 170, where we will sing "The Lord's My Shepherd." Before I offer the benediction, I just want to let you folks know that that the family will be gathering for a short time for a graveside service where we will inter Jack's ashes, and so we'll let the family process out first. The rest of you are invited to file out and head into the fellowship hall where there will be a lunch served, and the family will join you as soon as possible. Now I invite you to receive the benediction. May God bless you and keep you. May Christ's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Spirit look upon you with kindness and give you peace. Amen.